The first time I realized my wife was lying to me, she was standing barefoot in our kitchen, smiling at her phone. It was almost midnight. I had just returned from a 3-day business trip, exhausted, carrying a small gift I had bought for her at the airport. Claire didn't hear me enter. She was leaning against the counter, reading a message with a smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. Not a polite smile. Not the tired little smile married people give each other after 12 years together. This was different. It was nervous, excited, almost youthful. Then she noticed my reflection in the dark kitchen window. Her smile disappeared. "You're home early," she said. My flight landed ahead of schedule. She quickly turned her phone face down. I placed my bag near the door and held out the small box. "I brought you something." For a second, guilt passed across her face. Then it was gone. "You didn't have to." Inside the box was a silver bracelet with a small blue stone. Claire had once told me blue reminded her of the lake near my grandfather's old house. That house was more than a building to me. My grandfather had built it himself 40 years earlier. My father had taught me how to fish from its dock. After both of them died, the house became mine. Claire and I had spent our first summer as a married couple there. At least I remembered it that way. She barely looked at the bracelet before setting it on the counter. "I'm tired," she said. "Can we talk tomorrow?" I nodded. But as she walked upstairs, her phone vibrated again. She picked it up so quickly that it almost slipped from her hand. That was the moment something inside me changed. I didn't confront her. I didn't demand to see the phone. I didn't raise my voice. I simply started paying attention. Over the next 2 weeks, Claire became a different person. She began taking calls outside. She suddenly had evening meetings at the marketing firm where she worked. She bought new clothes but never wore them when we went anywhere together. Most telling of all, she became strangely interested in my finances. One evening, while we were eating dinner, she casually asked, "Did you ever transfer the lake house into both our names?" I looked up from my plate. "No." She paused. "I thought we discussed it." "We didn't. But we're married, Daniel. It should belong to both of us. It's protected by my grandfather's trust." Her fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "A trust." I nodded. "My grandfather created it before he died. The property can't be sold or transferred without approval from the trustee." Claire stared at me for a second too long. Then she smiled. "Of course. I was only asking." That night, she slept with her back toward me. 3 days later, I received a phone call from Martin Hayes, the attorney who managed my grandfather's trust. "Daniel," he said, "did you authorize someone to request ownership records for the lake property?" "No." There was silence on the line. "A woman claiming to be your wife contacted my office. She asked about removing the property from the trust." My hand tightened around the phone. "What did you tell her?" "Nothing important. But she seemed convinced that you intended to sell." I looked through the glass wall of my office. Outside, employees moved through the hallway carrying coffee and folders, unaware that my marriage had just begun collapsing around me. "Martin, don't contact Claire." "Are you sure?" "Yes. Let her believe you never called me." That evening, I returned home and acted completely normal. Claire was sitting at the dining table with her laptop open. She closed it when I entered. "How was work?" she asked. "Busy." I kissed her cheek. Her body stiffened. On the table beside her laptop was a business card. I only saw it for a second before she covered it with her hand. Evan Mercer. Real Estate Development. I recognized the name. Mercer Development had been buying old lakefront properties, tearing down the houses, and replacing them with luxury rental cabins. The company had tried to buy my grandfather's property twice. I had refused both offers. That night, while Claire was showering, I looked at her laptop. I already knew her password. It was the date of our wedding anniversary. The irony almost made me laugh. Her email account was open. I found the messages within 30 seconds. There were dozens. Some were between Claire and Evan Mercer. Others were between Claire and a real estate agent. The earliest message was dated 6 months earlier. Claire wasn't just having an affair. She was planning to sell my grandfather's house. She had told Evan that I was emotionally attached to the property but that she could persuade me to sign the necessary documents. In another message, Evan wrote, "Once the property is ours, we can stop hiding. You'll have enough money to leave him and start over with me, **. Claire replied, **Daniel trusts me." He always signs documents when I tell him they're related to taxes. Asterisk. I read that sentence 3 times. Not because I couldn't understand it, because I understood it perfectly. For 12 years, I had believed that trust was the strongest part of our marriage. Claire saw it as a weakness. I continued reading. She and Evan had been meeting in hotels during my business trips. She had sent him photographs from inside the lake house. She had even shown him the bedroom where my grandparents had slept. They had discussed tearing down the house. Claire called it an old wooden box. Evan called it prime land. Together, they estimated they could sell the redeveloped property for nearly $4 million. My wife planned to take half the money in the divorce. Then she planned to disappear with him. The shower stopped upstairs. I photographed every message with my phone, closed the laptop, and returned to the kitchen. Claire came downstairs 20 minutes later wearing a robe. "You look tired," she said. "I am." She poured herself a glass of wine. "We should go to the lake house this weekend." I looked at her. "Why?" "We haven't been there in months. It might be romantic." Romantic? She was taking me to my grandfather's house so she could prepare me to sell it to the man she was sleeping with. "That sounds nice," I said. Claire smiled. And for the first time I smiled back because I knew something she didn't. The trust wasn't the only protection around the property. 6 months earlier, after Mercer Development's second offer, Martin and I had transferred management authority to a private holding company. My name did not appear publicly as its manager. Even if Claire somehow convinced me to sign a sale contract, the transaction would remain invalid unless the holding company approved it. And I controlled the holding company. Claire believed she was leading me toward a trap. She had no idea she was already standing inside mine. On Friday evening we drove to the lake house. Claire spent most of the journey texting. Every time I glanced toward her, she turned the phone away. The old house appeared between the trees just before sunset. Its wooden porch glowed in the warm light, and the lake behind it was perfectly still. My chest tightened when I saw it. I remembered my grandfather sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee. I remembered my father laughing while our small fishing boat filled with rainwater. I remembered asking Claire to marry me beneath the large oak tree near the shore. For her, it was valuable land. For me, it was every person I had loved and lost. Claire stepped out of the car and looked around. "You know," she said, "this place could be worth a fortune." "I know. We don't really use it. I use it twice a year. That's enough." She sighed. "I'm just saying we should think about our future." I carried our bags inside. That evening, she opened an expensive bottle of wine and suggested we sit near the fireplace. For the first hour, she was unusually affectionate. She touched my arm. She laughed at my jokes. She talked about the vacations we could take and the new house we could buy. Then she finally said it. "I received an offer for this place." I pretended to be surprised. "You received an offer?" "A developer contacted me. It's a very generous amount." "How did a developer get your number?" She looked down at her wine. "I think I filled out something online months ago." Another lie. "How much?" $2 million. Mercer Development's private emails valued the land at more than twice that amount. Claire and Evan planned to purchase it cheaply through one company, then transfer it to another. My own wife intended to help him steal millions from me. "That's a lot of money," I said. Her eyes brightened. "Exactly. We could finally start living." I looked around the room. My grandfather's tools still hung near the back door. My father's old fishing photograph rested above the fireplace. I thought we were already living. "You know what I mean." She reached into her bag and removed a folder. Inside was a preliminary agreement. She had brought the documents with her. "I asked the agent to prepare something," she said. "It isn't final. It only allows them to begin inspections." I slowly turned the pages. The agreement did much more than allow inspections. It gave Mercer Development an exclusive purchase option and included a penalty of $300,000 if I attempted to cancel. Claire pointed to the signature line. "We can have our attorney review it later." "Our attorney?" She smiled nervously. "Of course." I picked up the pen. Her phone vibrated on the table. She looked at the screen. I already knew who it was. Evan was probably waiting for confirmation. I held the pen above the paper. Claire watched me without blinking. Then I signed. Her shoulders relaxed. She tried to hide her smile but she couldn't. "See," she said softly. "This is going to change everything." She was right. It would. What Claire didn't know was that I had signed with my personal name, even though the property was controlled by the holding company. The agreement was worthless. But I needed her to believe she had won. I needed Evan to believe it too. Because Martin and I had already prepared another document. A document that would force Mercer Development to reveal every investor, every hidden company, and every person involved in their attempted purchase. By signing Claire's fake victory, I had given them the confidence to move forward. Now I only had to wait for them to expose themselves. At 2 in the morning, I woke up and found Claire missing from the bed. I heard her voice outside. She was standing on the porch, speaking quietly on the phone. "He signed it," she whispered. Pause. Then she laughed. "No, he doesn't suspect anything." I stood in the dark hallway listening. "When the inspection is finished, I'll convince him to sign the final contract. After that, we file for divorce." Another pause. "I love you too." Claire ended the call and remained on the porch, looking across the lake that she believed would soon belong to her lover. I returned to bed before she came inside. She lay down beside me and placed her hand on my shoulder. For 12 years that touch had made me feel safe. Now it felt like the hand of a stranger. The next morning, Claire made breakfast and acted happier than she had in months. I played my role. I drank coffee. I asked about her work. I even discussed possible houses we could buy after the sale. But beneath the table I sent one message to Martin. She gave them the signed agreement. His reply arrived a minute later. Good. Phase 2 begins Monday. Claire looked at me and smiled. "What are you thinking about?" I placed my phone face down. "Our future." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. She thought our future meant millions of dollars, a new life with Evan, and my complete humiliation. But our future was already inside the black folder locked in Martin's office. Hotel receipts, emails, financial records, fraudulent property documents, and one legal notice that would destroy the plan before Claire ever saw the divorce coming. I didn't want to scream at her. I didn't want to beg her to choose me. I wanted her to keep smiling. I wanted her to keep lying. Most of all, I wanted her to sign her own name beneath every betrayal. Because when the truth finally arrived, she would never be able to claim she was innocent. And on Monday morning, Claire received the first document. She opened the envelope while standing in our kitchen. Her face slowly turned pale. "What is this?" she whispered. I took another sip of coffee. It was a formal notice informing her that the lake property was owned by a private holding company. The same company that had just filed a lawsuit against Mercer Development for attempted fraud. Claire looked up at me. For the first time since this began, there was real fear in her eyes. "Daniel," she said, "you need to let me explain." I calmly placed my coffee cup on the table. "No, Claire." I looked directly at the woman who had planned to sell my family's history and escape with another man. "You need to call Evan." Her lips parted. "Why?" "Because right now, federal investigators are entering his office." Her phone began ringing. Evan's name appeared on the screen. And that was when my wife finally understood. I had never been the fool in her plan. She was. Evan's name continued flashing on Claire's phone. She stared at the screen as if answering it might make everything disappear. It rang 5 times before stopping. Then it started again. "Answer him," I said. Claire looked at me. Her face had lost all color. "What did you do?" "I protected my property." "You said federal investigators were entering his office." "They are." She gripped the edge of the kitchen counter. "Daniel, you don't understand." "I understand more than you think." The phone stopped ringing again. A message appeared. Don't answer anyone. Delete everything. Claire tried to cover the screen with her hand, but I had already read it. "Very romantic," I said. Tears formed in her eyes. "This isn't what it looks like." I almost laughed. 4 months she had been sleeping with another man, planning to steal my family home, and preparing to divorce me after the sale. Now she wanted to discuss appearances. "Then tell me what it is." She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. I walked toward the hallway and picked up my coat. "Where are you going?" she asked. "To work." "You can't leave me like this." "I think you plan to leave me with much less." She followed me to the front door. "Daniel, please." I stopped. For 1 weak second I wanted to turn around. Not because I believed her. Because part of me still remembered the woman she had been when we met. The woman who laughed in the rain. The woman who helped my father cook fish at the lake house. The woman who cried when my grandfather's old dog died. But that woman had either disappeared or had never truly existed. The woman standing behind me had reduced my family history to a financial opportunity. I opened the door. "You have until tonight to find somewhere else to stay." Her expression changed. "This is my home too." The house is rented through my company. Your name isn't on the lease. She stared at me. You planned this? No. You planned it? I just finally started reading the documents. I left without looking back. Martin was waiting for me at his office. The black folder sat on the conference table between us. It was thicker than before. We have confirmation, he said. Mercer used 3 separate companies to hide the true buyer. Claire provided internal information about the trust and attempted to misrepresent your authority. Will she be charged? That depends on how much she cooperates. Right now, the investigators are more interested in Evan. He has done this before. Martin opened the folder. Inside were records connected to 5 other lakefront properties. Older owners had been pressured into signing unfair agreements. Some were told their homes were structurally unsafe. Others were threatened with lawsuits they could never afford to fight. Evan wasn't only stealing from me. He had built an entire business around finding vulnerable people and taking what mattered most to them. Claire had known enough to understand what kind of man he was. She simply believed she would benefit from it. What happens next? I asked. Evan's attorney requested a meeting. When? This afternoon. Does he know I'll be there? No. I looked at the black folder. Good. The meeting took place in a private conference room at a downtown law firm. Evan arrived first with 2 attorneys. He wore an expensive navy suit and the confident expression of a man who had spent years believing money made him untouchable. That expression disappeared when I entered. He stood quickly. You. Good afternoon, Evan. One of his attorneys looked between us. You know each other? Evan said nothing. I sat across from him while Martin placed the black folder on the table. Evan's eyes moved toward it. He knew exactly what it contained. Martin began calmly. My client is willing to discuss resolving the attempted property transaction without a lengthy civil case. Evan leaned back. There was no attempted fraud. Your client signed the agreement. My client did, Martin said. But he had no legal authority to sell the property. That isn't our responsibility. It becomes your responsibility when your company knowingly hides the buyer's identity, underestimates the property's value, and encourages a third party to obtain a signature through deception. Evan looked at me. Claire acted independently. There it was. The betrayal I had expected. He was already preparing to sacrifice her. I folded my hands on the table. She told me you loved her. His jaw tightened. This is a business meeting. For you, maybe. Martin opened the folder and placed copies of several emails on the table. Evan glanced at them. His confidence began to crack. One email showed him instructing Claire to misrepresent the purpose of the agreement. Another discussed moving the property through a shell company. A third contained his promise that Claire would receive a private payment after the divorce. His attorney whispered something to him. Evan shook his head. These messages are incomplete. Martin placed a small audio recorder beside the documents. Would you prefer the phone conversations? Evan froze. Claire had recorded some of their calls. Not intentionally. Her phone automatically backed up voice messages and saved deleted files to a shared cloud account. She never remembered that I had originally configured it. We had everything. Evan's attorney requested a private discussion. Martin and I stepped outside. Through the glass wall, I watched Evan arguing with his legal team. He pointed toward the documents. One attorney shook his head repeatedly. For the first time, Evan looked afraid. After 20 minutes, we returned. His attorney cleared his throat. Mr. Mercer is willing to cooperate with the investigation and discuss financial restitution. Under one condition, Evan added. Martin raised an eyebrow. What condition? Evan looked directly at me. Claire accepts full responsibility for obtaining the signature. I felt nothing. No surprise. No satisfaction. Only confirmation. He had promised her a new life. Now he was offering her life to save his own. You should tell her yourself, I said. The door opened behind us. Claire entered. She wore the same black coat she had used during her secret meetings with Evan. Her eyes were swollen from crying. Martin had asked her to attend but had not told her why. When she saw Evan, relief crossed her face. She rushed toward him. Evan, thank God. He didn't stand. She stopped beside his chair. What's happening? They're saying I could be charged. Evan looked at his attorney. Then he looked at Claire. You handled the documents. Her expression changed. What? You contacted Daniel's attorney. You brought him the agreement. You told me he was willing to sell. Claire stared at him. You told me what to say. I never told you to lie. Her mouth fell open. Martin silently placed the printed emails in front of her. Claire read the first page. Then the second. Her hands began trembling. You said we were doing this together. Evan looked away. You made your own decisions. She gave a broken laugh. My own decisions? Her voice rose. You were in my hotel room. You were in the lake house. You told me where Daniel needed to sign. Claire, his attorney warned, you should stop talking. She turned toward him. No.